A change is you saying, hey, this is my reality. I'm going to change it a little bit because I like what is on the other side. So now that you've chosen that, you've chosen, okay, I want to have a different reality. It would mean that you're about to break the mold. You're about to break your structure that you so love because that's your identity. That's your life.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State podcast. Your host here, Dr. Kien Vu, or Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And I am just so thrilled to have my guest here to share his story with us today. Why am I so thrilled? Why am I so happy? Why does it bring a joy and smile to my face? Because about 5 to 6 years ago, I really had a health crisis of my own, and it took me some time to really wake up to how I was living my life. How do I make new choices and things like that? And, it brought me down a path of personal development. I started to study with people like Tony Robbins, Vishen Lakhiani, and the people of Mindvalley. And Mindvalley was actually one of the educational platforms that I went to. And it really changed my life in so many different ways. The person who is on the podcast with us today was actually CEO of Mindvalley a couple of years ago. And he has a remarkable story. He has a story of basically coming from a very, very small town in India and having to really kind of expand and evolve into this person who is now speaking all around the world in international stages. And it's a remarkable story, not only of Mindvalley, of how somebody has taken their life and how they have gone through so many different transformations. And particularly on today's podcast, whatever you want to do for you, if you want a transformation in your own life, whether it be in your health, in your finances, in how you think, in your relationships, you're going to want to listen to this because we dive into how you take information. How do you take what you think you need to do, but actually do that so that you have transformation? How to go from information to transformation. That's what we're going to talk about on today's podcast, and I can't wait for you to listen to it. And if you're new to this podcast, please do us a favor, subscribe to this podcast, ring the notification button so you don't miss any episodes in the future. And if you have listened to this podcast and it's given you value, please do us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review at ratethispodcast.com/thrivestate. Now on to my guest. Our next guest was actually born in a very small town of India called Jaipur. And he grew up in one roof with 23 other family members. Space and money were scarce. And so as a little boy, Ajit actually dreamt of abundance. He made a decision to plant himself where he can grow. First, he started off as a trainee for a nonprofit, and then he held various roles and finally actually climbed to the role of CEO of Mindvalley. And he's also co-founder of Mindvalley Teach, co-founder of the Global Grit Institute, and co-founder of Epic Businesses. Ajit is an author of 2 best-selling books, Live Big and The Book of Coaching. Ajit believes it is possible to create the abundant reality we want. He is also passionate to share the business and productivity strategies that has helped him build and grow numerous multi-million-dollar companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome and listen to this amazing conversation with myself and Ajit Nawalkha. Ajit Nawalkha, welcome to the Thrive State podcast, brother. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Kien. So exciting to meet after a few weeks or maybe even a few months because we live in different cities now. So.
Yeah, I know. And being able to see you, feel your energy. I mean, it's part of me just wants to connect again, but you know what? I do want to give value to the people listening. So we're going to dive right to it. You might not know this, but we do something called the 5 to Thrive. 5 quick questions just to kind of get the conversation a little bit lubricated. Are you ready to start?
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1 for you. You are the coach of coaches, So let me ask you this. What is your favorite coaching strategy or distinction that you have? You probably have lots of tools, but what's one favorite one?
Well, there's one that is a really long process and I call it the process, but I'll give you one element of the process that I think is important for anybody to be able to experience transformation fairly quickly. And
Mm,
that is what I call organizing your mind, which is how we really choose our thinking patterns. You see, most of us have default thinking patterns that we have developed over
yeah,
years and years of our life, mostly because that's how you survive, right? As a
right.
child, you pick some patterns. As an adult, you pick some patterns. But most of the time, we are unconscious of these patterns and thinking patterns, and we just default to them because they are our safe space. It's like
Yeah.
going home to a thinking pattern. And more often than not, our suffering is a function of those survival thinking patterns that we've unconsciously picked up because at some point they were true. So if today you want to change your life, more likely than not, if you could choose your thinking pattern instead of just falling for the pattern that you always go for, you will most likely change your life. So that's one of my favorite things to do with
Mm,
clients when they are in a trap, when they are in a habit loop, when they are in a situation where they feel like, I've been here before. I am with the same kind of gal that I've been with before. I'm with the same kind of guy I've been with before. I'm stuck in my business like I've been before. That's
mm.
most likely, if you feel stuck today, it's because of that thinking pattern.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I want to dive into that more because I know that's part of the process of going from information to transformation. So, very good being able to recognize your thinking patterns and beliefs. Question number two is the biggest epiphany you've had in life, or one of the biggest epiphanies. We probably have to go through so many.
It will be hard to choose the biggest epiphany, but I think the most transformative epiphany that allowed me to understand humanity
Mm,
a lot better, and my clients a lot better, and my own experiences a lot better, my friends and my family a lot better, is to recognize the fact
mhm.
that if I could go from trying to understand somebody to actually putting myself in their shoes, I would recognize and realize that all of us are going through not the same experience, but a very similar experience.
Mm,
And because of that, it is very easy for me in today's time, even when we are wildly conflicted in our belief systems and we are politically disparate and culturally disparate and agree and disagree on many, many different things, it is easy for me to be able to empathize with the other side.
yeah,
It's easy for me to be able to empathize with a client because I no longer view the world as from a sense of righteousness,
yeah.
from a sense of that I know what is right for you. I more importantly think or try to think or put myself into a situation where I say, what may be a potential experience that you are having? And
Mm,
if I could lean into that, it makes it much easier for me to recognize the beauty in everybody that is around us, recognize the humanity of everybody that is around us, because all of us are going through this beautiful experience that creates our realities called life.
yeah, I hear you, brother. And spoken like somebody who's done a lot of deep inner work to be able to get to that point. Question number three for you: the biggest change in your life after being a dad, whether it be a
Oh.
perspective or your routines. What's one thing you'd like to share?
Well, there's a good thing and a bad thing.
Mhm.
The good thing is I've recognized the power of health a lot more than I ever did
Yeah,
because of my kids. Because I started to only my values were always service and love,
yeah.
and then I added freedom to it. And only after my kids have I added health to it, because I recognized that if I want to truly enjoy this experience called life, I must be able to enjoy this body, because this
Yes.
body is the way I
Mhm.
get to experience life in this physical world. And
Yeah.
if I can't take care of this body, I may not be able to fully enjoy the expansion of life that it offers as you age, right?
Mm,
And the opportunities that it opens as you age, and that you don't have to deteriorate your body because of your age. You can actually rebuild your body. So that's been my big great experience. And one of the epiphanies, or one of my things that I've recognized, is how much I love sleep and how little I get off it, because of my kids, because they're really small right now.
yeah.
So yeah, that's another thing that I've recognized in life.
Beautiful. All right. Question number four: what are you most proud of?
Well, I'm proud of many things, man. I mean, I'm proud of the life that I live. I'm proud of my family. I'm proud of my kids. I'm proud of the situation of the world that we are in, and then the
Mm,
expansion that we have. So, wouldn't say there's one highlight that I could give to life is just so diverse and expansive. It's really hard to spot a thing. If you would ask me a few years ago, I was very proud that I could finally get myself out of the situation of, or get my family out of the situation where I grew up in a household of 23 people. And the
oh
one
yeah, we
thing,
want to get into that. So let's not
yeah.
divulge too much now.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so then I would cap it with the state I'm in today, which is
Oh, very
I
good.
am
Yes.
proud of the experience of life
Yeah.
that I get to have every single day.
Beautiful, beautiful. And last question for you is, how would you like to be remembered?
You know, that's one of the most difficult questions I have never been able to answer.
Mm,
And the reason I want to expand a little bit on that, why that is a difficult question. You see, I've been many times asked a version of this question, which is, what's your legacy? Right.
yeah.
That's kind of like what people tend to ask. And I can't seem to wrap my head around, why do I need one?
Mm,
Why do I need to be remembered in one way or another?
mm,
I feel what I want to do is I want to make the most out of this experience that we get to have.
yeah.
I want to enjoy it every day. I want to be in the moment and really soak it all in and bathe in it every single day.
Hmm.
And if I do something good because of it, I think, great, you might remember me.
Hmm.
But it is okay if you forget me too, because what I really am doing is I am trying to have the greatest experience of my life and do something meaningful for people around me.
Mm,
And if it contributes to something huge and magnum opus and everybody wants to remember it, go for it. But if they want to forget about it, I don't think it really makes a difference to my experience of life. So
mm,
I really have a hard time answering that question. I have never been really, truly, honestly been able to answer that question. I
mm,
almost always have to explain why I can get myself to think about my legacy or how I want to be remembered. I
mm.
would want to be remembered by my kids as a good parent, and by my wife as a good partner, and by my friends as a good friend and a generous human being. But if you talk about, legacy and big thinking and so forth from the world outside, that I have no control in their perception of
Yeah.
me. I don't know if I necessarily want to seek that approval in one way or another. I think
Mm.
I am very happy creating what I get to create, live in the creation of my being, and be able to live a beautiful life and enjoy the most of it without harming the planet, and hopefully doing something meaningful for the generations to come.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. And I know just from following you, just from, I really like study the people that I admire. And, I look back at your career. I looked at, your speeches from like 10 years ago, pictures of you when you were much, much bigger, and just see this transformation. And that's where I want to take people, because right now you've built so many different companies, companies that probably one of the top coaching companies in the world, and you've gotten to this state, but you've come from very, very humble beginnings. So, I mean, one, I'd like to be able to bring that to light, because many people would probably say, okay, well, how do I get from a place where I probably don't have the opportunities that I think I should have, to getting to that next level? So I'd love to go through the transformation. You talk about, you're not born here, obviously.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I wasn't born in Austin, Texas. No.
And yeah, so you were from India. So tell us about your childhood and where you were. You were just about to mention, like, you were living with 23 relatives or something like that.
Yeah, so in India, I was born in India in a small town called Jaipur, and I lived in the old city, which is not a very affluent area of the city. Very humble beginnings. We shared our house with 23 other people, with cousins and second cousins and everything, grandparents, parents, everybody together. And of course, when 23 people are sharing a space, there is no real space, right? And it also kind of signifies there was no real abundance in the house per se. And so I grew up in a reality where I didn't even have a room or space where I could have quiet time or study time or play time. The room that me and my brother slept in was our study room in the day, and guest room if guests were over. and the dining hall and everything, because that was the only other room. We had two rooms between four individuals, pretty much across the whole house. That really is how I grew up. And because of that, around when I was 13 years old, I had a moment of revelation, where I decided that the one thing I want to do in my life is to not be in this situation ever again.
Mm.
I don't want to be able to, I don't want to live a life where I have no space. I don't want to live a life where I can't afford things. I don't want to live a life where I can't help people around me. I don't want to live a life where my parents are struggling for space and sleeping in an even smaller room than what me and my brother got to sleep in. I just didn't want that for my life. And so very early on in my life, I decided that I'm gonna I'm gonna do something about it. I'm going to
Mm.
do something about it. And sure enough, I first thought, because that was my reality around me, where people said, hey, become an engineer, which is a common thing in India. Become an engineer, become a doctor, become an accountant if you want to be successful. And so first I started that journey. I was like, all right, I'm going to try and be an engineer, and I was good at physics and math. And so it was, and I loved physics and math as well. So I loved studying it as well. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, and, I'm going to try and be an engineer. And as I was studying for it, I ended up meeting a lot of engineers. And I realized that once you become an engineer, there's very little of physics and maths that you actually do. You're actually doing really mundane work. There is no real learning. There is really no curiosity. There's not as much joy as learning something new in math and physics as when you're in the school, because every year there's a new curriculum that gets harder and more difficult and more complex and more fun if you enjoy it, right? I enjoyed it, at least. I enjoyed chemistry too,
Mm.
because it was like new things every time you were learning. And I realized that's not what happens once you become an engineer. You're kind of doing, if you become a software engineer, which is what I was training for, you actually are mostly debugging code for most of your life. And I was like, that is not what I want to do. That does not sound exciting. That is really boring. And I don't want to do it. And so I wrote a letter to my father, and I said, hey, listen, I can't do this. This is not me. I would be bored and I would not be happy. I might make money, but I would really not be happy. And my dad is a very kind person and a very clear person. He's very honest and straightforward about pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And so he brought me to the room, and my mom was crying on one side of the room. And my dad said, listen, son, we've invested a lot in your training as an engineer. And your mom, of course, clearly does not agree with what your letter says. And there is one truth that you need to know. If you haven't realized, your father is not a wealthy man. He doesn't have a lot of money, and I can only support you that much. So what I can do, sorry, he started with here's what I cannot do. If you tell me 3, 4, 5 years later, hey, support me to build a company or support me to get a career, get a job, I can't do that for you. I don't have the resources. I don't have the money. I don't have the connections. I can't get you set up like a lot of wealthy people can for their kids.
Yeah.
What I can do for you is support you for the next 3 years. You see, to graduate a college in India is a 3-year process. So he
Mm-hmm.
said, the thing that I'm not going to negotiate is that you don't go to college. You have to go to college. You can take a different degree, just whatever is easy and something that can, at least keep you and get you a degree. So go get a degree. I can support you for these 3 years to figure out what you need to do. But that's pretty much what I got. So you have support of mine for the next 3 years to go get an education and figure out what you need to do in your life. And after that, you're on your own. So that kind of set, and I was like 17 years old, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it kind of set a timer in my mind and also pushed me to an edge where I had to get real skills really fast. Now, I know it's commonplace in America to really start working very early on, but it's not commonplace in India to go get a job at 17. You
Mm-hmm.
just don't do that because it's very family oriented. It's like, no, focus on your education, graduate, and then go get a job. But I was the opposite. I was like, all right, I got to figure out what I need to do. So I'm going to go start getting jobs at 17 and put myself in wildly uncomfortable situations, because it wasn't only that I had to go get a job. I had to find what I really want to do,
Mm.
because it wasn't going to be things that I loved, which was math and physics, because that would be engineering and that would suck. I didn't want to do that. So it put me on a track of career where I had to start getting part-time jobs, where I started working with educational institutes coincidentally, which I only now realize going looking backward, oh crap, I've always been helping education companies. I
Mm-hmm.
started getting internships there, started doing part-time jobs there, designing their papers, doing computer work for them, doing like really grunt work that the institutes didn't know how to do. And a 17-year-old clearly knew because, I was anyway savvy a little bit. And so I started getting those jobs and started making money when I was 17. And in time, that will all pay off because that gave me not a sense of clarity of career, but more a sense of clarity of that I can figure things out. Like I
Yeah.
can put myself into a situation and I will figure it out. I'm a good person at figuring things out. I'm a good person in building connections and relationships with people and in a respectful way. I may not become the closest friends, but there will be mutual respect between each other and we'll honor each other's capabilities, which made me an incredible leader from very early stage of my life. And those skills I kept carrying forward. Started to push myself pretty much all the time to get my employers to invest in crazy ideas I would come up with and startup companies and blow them up, but still get rehired by the same companies that invested in those projects and so on and so forth. And soon enough, I found this small startup in Malaysia called Mindvalley,
Mm-hmm.
which now is, of course, a giant enterprise. Can you
Right.
know much about that already? And so at that time when I found it was like 10 employees. I think we were working out of a house, which was not even legal in Malaysia to work out of a house. So it was actually a residential house, but to save rent, that's what the founder of Mind Valley had done because of only 10 people. We to make it look like it was a house, we had a bed inside the office. So if somebody comes to check, we could say one of us lived there, and these were just friends hanging out on their computers. There was so much of a startup at that time,
Wow, the
but
origin
sure enough,
story of Mind Valley.
oh, it's like you got to talk to Vishen someday. He is such a crazy story. Really, the origin story is even crazier of how it started in his dad's warehouse, actually, even before that, where he had a rickety desk on the side. That's for Vishen to tell. I don't want to butcher his story. But anyway, so 8 years in, I end up being the CEO of the company. And the big transformation that I was talking about at a moment of pride that I had was right before I was turning in the CEO role. The one goal, like I mentioned, that I had in life was that I will never want to experience lack of space, lack of abundance, lack of wealth in my life. Is that around 2012, which is 2012, 2013, which is about 2 years before I was the CEO of Mindvalley.
Mhm.
I'd already become really successful. Mindvalley already had gotten really big. I was able to buy a house as a surprise for my parents, where we got in there. And when they went in there, they thought we were just, like checking out stuff. They didn't know I was going to buy it. And I bought it, and the papers had their name on it as the
Mhm.
owners of the house,
Yeah.
and they were wildly delighted. And my mom was really really elated and happy and excited that she get to finally live in a house where she's not scrambling for space,
Mm.
where she has her own room, and kids have their own room, and grandkids have their own room. And so that was a moment of pride for me, also to see her so happy. And yeah, after that, as I was CEO of Mindvalley, I had a whole other transition where I had realized that while running the company, I had forgotten about anything else but the title of the company. Like I had a moment in end of 2014. We had a 2 week break in the company because it was Christmas time. Everybody in Mindvalley is a global company. People come from like 35 different countries at that time. Everybody was wanting to go back to Europe and different parts of the world that they came in from because it was holiday time. Vision was away. Everybody was away basically, except a
Yeah.
few of us who were Malaysians or who were from countries they didn't want to go because Christmas was not a thing for them. And there were just a few people, but that meant after a long time, I had time with myself. For 2 weeks, I was pretty much alone because my then wife had also chosen to go back to Italy, where she was from. And I had 2 weeks to myself. And I realized in those 2 weeks how alone I was, how lonely I was, how incapable and lack of understanding I had of myself, except the title that I had, which was CEO. It's
Hmm.
like, what about my health? What do I believe about myself? What do I truly want? I didn't have answers to these questions because I had, in the chase of getting abundant, I had forgotten that I was living life. I wasn't just trying to be rich. I want to live this life. This experience that I have is a fleeting experience, and I wanted to have to experience all of it.
Yeah.
And that moment of realization got me to say, I gotta take a break from everything. And it got me that around 7th of January is when Vision came back, and I turned in my papers and then realized that I don't know what to do next because I had turned in my papers and I was like, oh crap, yes, I quit, but I don't know what to do now. But
Hmm.
those 6 months that were utilized for transition was a good time for me to really recognize myself and take my time with myself to recognize what I wanted to do. And that is where EverCoach was born. And that is what the company is now. Like we talked about, it's in partnership with Mindvalley
Yeah.
because Vision still is a dear friend and great business partner. And so we chose to build it together.
That's amazing. Oh my God. Well, let me just start with a few things now. You had gone from very small town in rural India to become a CEO of a international company. And then now speaking on stages with Lisa Nichols, Vishen Lakhiani, all the top people. As a child, did you feel like you were capable of doing this? And as you were going through this process, was there any part of maybe older mindset that said, I don't deserve this, or any imposter syndrome come up as you started to evolve into the next version of yourself?
I'll answer the two questions in there. So the
Yeah.
first part is, as a child, did I believe I'll be doing this at some point? No. And the answer is because that wasn't something that was even a career option. Like that
Yeah.
was not a thing. Like nobody, I
Mhm.
didn't know what was personal development and personal transformation. What I always did dream about in some way or another was teaching. That was for sure. I
Mhm.
used to make believe. I know all kids do, right? People make believe. I used to make believe I was a teacher. So even how I learned as a kid, like physics and maths and things that I really loved, history, was by me teaching myself. If you would really take zoom out and look at myself at that time on how I was studying, it was almost like I was explaining myself. Okay, so this is how this comes together to make this. Like I would tell myself stories so I can learn the history lessons. Oh no, these were the bad guys and these were the good guys. And then the heroes banded together by this country called US who said, hey,
Mhm.
we're going to come help you out. And all the heroes got together and then they fought these guys called Nazis. And then
Mm.
they beat their ass first on this territory, then on this territory, and then eventually they won. So I was always in my hidden desire was always to be a teacher in some
Mhm.
version, but it was never in context of, oh, you could be a global speaker where you're talking on these virtual environments and physical environments. It was more like a school teacher. I would love to teach kids, or I would love to teach. That was it. And that was the period. That was the end of it all. But that was definitely a fascinating thing for me always. But I never thought that it would be a career, right? Because who makes money teaching, right? Teachers are probably the most important part of society and the most underpaid part of society as well at the same time. So if you want to be wealthy, you're not trying to be a teacher, right? And so that was never in my worldview to do it as a career. It was more like, a dream that I would never fulfill. Now, does my old programming come up on, do I deserve this? Am I enough? I don't think that ever goes away for
Mhm.
anybody. I
Mhm.
think that is just an awareness
Yeah.
that
Mm.
stays, that all right, is this just all make believe? Is this all real? Is it actually going to stay around? Is it a thing? I think anybody who has a good amount of self-awareness
Yeah.
knows that there is, yes, incredible amount of hard work and skill and talent that goes into doing what we do, but there is an element of, and I've been seeking to find a real word for it, so I'm gonna use a cop out word because it's not the word that is true to this, but I call it luck for now
Mhm.
because there's an element of it. It's been a conversation between some of us friends where we've been talking about, and I've been talking about, there's so many people who work way harder than me, are more talented than me, and in theory should be more successful than me. But for whatever reason, things haven't worked out. the way
Yeah.
it should work out, right? And I can't explain it. I don't want to say it's the plan of the universe because I don't really know the plan of the universe. But and that's why I'm saying luck, because I
Mhm.
don't have a word for it. I don't know what is it that is different between these two very similar individuals, great in their own unique ways, but it's working out for one person and not working out for one person. So it's hard to determine for me, and that is where I think anybody who is self-aware enough would recognize that there is an element of unknown, element of not in our control, that has just worked it out for us, and we're grateful for it, and we should be.
Do you think any of that has to do with your ability to, I mean, really be in this personal development world, have more self-awareness and be able to maybe attach your limiting beliefs or attach negative energies that not true and be able to release them better than the next person?
Yes, and there's a yes and to it, because
Mm,
let's think about it like this. You have an equal capability to release your negative thinking like
mm,
I have, right?
yeah.
It's because it's independent to you. My ability to release my negative thinking is independent to me. I can give you the tools and the techniques and strategies for it, but because your experience is so unique, your capability in context of that experience is completely unique. So it's a yes and, because yes, I'm very capable of turning my mind around, but I don't necessarily think that the person that is working so hard is any less capable.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
So I want to recognize that yes, that is a talent that we
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
but I also want to recognize that it's not maybe as true that the other person doesn't have it. And there's no way I can truly, with confidence and with empirical evidence, confirm that they don't have it. And that's the difference,
I
right?
see.
Think about it. Think about somebody who works really, really hard, right?
Yeah.
You know the person, right? Like they're doing it. They're like spending the 8 hours, the 10 hours, the
Hmm.
14 hours. They're waiting up late in the night. They're
Yeah.
working till 11, 12 in the night. They're doing the extra hours. They're doing the work. They
Hmm.
got to have the right mindset to be able to pull that off.
This episode of the Thrive State podcast is brought to you by the Thrive State Accelerator. The Thrive State Accelerator is actually a home course that I developed using the exact same techniques I work with my celebrity clients, CEOs, and executives on how to get them to the Thrive State. The Thrive State Accelerator teaches you how to master your 7 bioenergetic elements. That's sleep, nutrition, movement, stress and emotional mastery, relationships, our thoughts and mindset, as well as purpose. In this Thrive State Accelerator, you're also going to get a bonus module on optimization. That's how I talk about supplementation, peptides, all the optimization techniques I use with my clients to get them to the Thrive State. Now, for some of you who are just joining us for the first time, you guys might be wondering, what is the Thrive State? Well, the Thrive State is actually the energy, the epigenetic environment we give to ourselves, telling our DNA how to act and how to respond. And if we want optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, if we can master these 7 bioenergetic elements, our ability to have those 3 things that we just said, optimal health, longevity, and peak performance, is at its greatest. And it also prevents you from getting chronic symptoms like brain fog, being overweight, feeling sluggish, acne, pain, all these chronic symptoms, as well as preventing you from getting chronic disease. So getting to that Thrive state is really getting to that state to master being that very best version of yourself so you could show up for you, for your family, for your business, everything that's important to you. So go ahead, check it out right now at kienvu.com/accelerator and use coupon code podcast25 for 25% off. Now back to the podcast. When you ask me of these things, I know the people who happen to be working real hard and just tell themselves, oh my God, I'm working real hard, versus the person who is just really jazzed up. And there's something different energetically in that person, which I feel in you as well. So I just wonder if, your ability to harness that energy, the ability to be aware of your energies and be able to, channel your energies in places that are a little bit more productive. Not everybody's able to do that. I mean, me being a coach, a lot of high executive people. I know that to be true as well.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Again, for me, and in my experience, I at least don't see that difference. Everybody feels after a hard day, they had a hard day.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an emotion, and there's nothing wrong with that emotion. If you've given it all and you're tired when you hit the bed, that's a good feeling. There's nothing wrong about that. In my opinion, at least in my experience of working with individuals, I don't see good people and successful people have negative experiences and negative emotions too. It's not that they're always in the state of positivity.
Right.
Because you can be, if you're being real with your emotions. It's just not possible, and it's not real. It is possible, but you're making believing it, right? It's not actually real. You're not in tune with your feelings if you are saying, oh, I'm always happy, and I'm always positive, because that's not possible. Because that's just not who you are as human beings, for that matter. And I recently talked about it in one of my videos, is the spectrum of amount of negative thoughts that a person has is wildly more than the spectrum of positive thoughts that they have. And we are naturally wired for it because it's a protection mechanism for our survival.
Yes. Yep.
You can beat that. You could be the biggest personal growth author and the biggest badass that I know. If you are truly in line with your feelings, you feel a negative emotion when you feel it, right? You are aware of it. The difference is you might say, oh, fuck, I'm feeling it. Okay, cool. I'm feeling it. I'll recognize the shit. And then I'm going to go on, right? I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to move on to my positive emotion. I'm going to do my affirmations. I'm going to put myself into that state by hitting the gym, running out, give a positive affirmation. But even the most badass entrepreneurs, the most badass personal growth authors, or whoever you may be, if they're truly in tune with their feelings, and they say, oh, I don't feel no negative emotions, I would say there's a sense of lack of awareness that sits.
Yeah. And authenticity.
I don't feel any negative emotions. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you just brought all this up. And I could tell that you do end up teaching yourself from a very, very young age, just as you described. And I heard you most recently describe how somebody can take information and turn that into transformation. Otherwise, every seminar you go to, every book you read ends up being shelf help instead of self-help. And you organize this into these pillars that was so good for somebody to understand. So how is it for somebody to just take on information? I mean, so many people listening to this podcast here wants better health, wants better wealth, wants to be the very best version of themselves. Sometimes they're just consuming. How do they take that information and change that into transformation for themselves?
So there are specific steps for it to be able to take information and turn it into transformation. I'm going to give the highlight reel.
Yeah.
So most people can understand what's the big difference. The challenge that, like you said, is that somebody will listen to this podcast. They'll be like, oh, great podcast, 5-star review, leave a great note for Kien, and Kien's awesome. And they'll move on. And that's good first few steps. You should go ahead and do that. Everybody that's listening to this podcast. But here's the difference between somebody that listens to the podcast and that actually leads to transformation. The difference is you listen to the information and then you say, what is it that was being said? And what did I understand of it? And that's the first step, is to draw. And you can do this even and it's a great, beautiful note-taking exercise. If you are taking notes while listening to the podcast, if you're driving, if you re-listen to this podcast later and you take notes, you want to do it like this. You want to take a piece of paper, and on the left column, draw a line in the middle. On the left column, write what you hear. So say you write, Kien said blank, right? And on the right hand side, say, what did I understand of it?
Yes.
Right. And the reason why you write that is because everybody will have a different translation. And if you don't believe me, ask your partner to do the same exercise without exchanging notes, and you will see both of you will come up with different. And that's why it's important to actually take these notes, right? You can do this. You will get really good at it, and you will start to do it even in your mind a little bit later. But it's a good practice to always do it in writing, because it's kind of, it's a different way to experience it, right?
Right.
So write down. So that's step one, is to really start to make sense of it. Second step is to take what you understood of it and turn it into a tool. And that's the thing that most people will not do, is they wouldn't go, okay, this is what I understood of it. What is it that is a tool here? Like, for example, we talked about, hey, organizing your mind. We talked briefly about that. It's like, hey, how can I make that a tool? How can I bring awareness to my mind to be able to see and observe my thoughts when I have a negative thought? And how can I turn it into a tool, right? And a personal tool, something that is real for me.
Yeah.
Like, like even this tool that I'm giving on how to really make information to transformation, you can say, okay, this is what Ajit thinks of how to make information to transformation. What is my tool? Something that is real to me, something that I will end up doing because it's more inherent to me. Ajit says, write it down, but maybe for you, it's a different way of approaching the whole thing, right? You might
Hmm.
want to take a mental note. You might want to
You might
put a
want to
white
sing it.
paper up.
Yeah.
Yes, you may want to draw a diagram out of it. There's
Yeah.
so many things that you could do, but that's personal to you. So that's the second step, is to say, hey, let's make it a tool for myself so I can make sense of this and implement it. And the third step is to actually go out and do it and refine it that fits your model of reality. See, we
Mm.
all have a model of reality. We all have inherent habits. We have inherent beliefs, inherent systems within us that govern our day to day autopilot world. And when you're looking for a transformation, you're basically saying, I'm going to make a dent in my autopilot world. That's really what's happening, right? A
Yeah.
transformation is a change. A change is you saying, hey, this is my reality. I'm going to change it a little bit because I like what is on the other side. So now that you've chosen that, you've chosen, okay, I want to have a different reality, it would mean that you're about to break the mold. You're about to break your structure that you so love because that's your identity, that's your life, right? So take that mold and now find a small dent that you can make. And that's the problem with habits. Most of the people have listened to some version of Tony Robbins, make massive change. Ah! Tony's awesome, but
Yeah.
make massive change or take big steps don't work. They don't work on a day-to-day thing. They're good for motivation. They might get you to quit your job, but if you want to build a new career, it's about every day going to work, right? It's
Yeah.
about every day making a small change so you can change or create your new reality. It's not only about the big massive step. For the matter, big massive step is more to say, I finally commit to something, but then
Hmm.
to actually commit and do it is small daily changes. So find that habit, find that transformation. Say, what is it that I'm going to do that will make a small dent in this big reality that I so love and so associate to and identify myself as? That small tool that brings that new change in your reality every single day and keeps building a new habit will eventually mean transformation for you. And that's really the three steps.
Oh, that's beautiful. And so just a summary there. If you want to take information to transformation as you're learning, make sure it's active. What do you hear? How do you interpret that? And then create something for yourself, something that you could apply, and then do it over and over and over again, recognizing that it's small, little, tiny steps repeated that turns into a habit that leads to the transformation within you. Now, I heard something that was also very beautiful, that as you're on your way to transformation, if you don't want to have things hold you back, you really need to start to be present of what's going on in here and be present here, not take your past into the situation, not be fearful of what's in the future. Can we walk through some of that process here? You said the very first thing people need to do a lot of times is to be present or to have presence.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the challenge that we have in life. Not the challenge, it's the beauty of life. And it is also our biggest clutches or biggest handcuffs in a way, is we learn through our experience, right? So everybody is a function of, in a way or another, the stories of their past. If you believe something about health and something happened in the past, a story that was being told, if your family was healthy and fit, you tend to be healthy and fit. If your family loved and binged on foods that were not good for you overall, you probably have a history of the diseases that have crippled our society, like diabetes and so on and so forth. That means you are more prone to getting those because you'll tend to eat the same foods because that's how you grew up. That's the story that has been told to you ever since your past. And so your past governs a lot of our behaviors in this moment. The problem with that is, because our past governs our present moments, it actually tends to start creating our future.
Yeah.
Because if you really think about it, this moment when you're listening to this podcast, this moment as I say this, is basically past and future happening at the same time. What I said 30 seconds ago is already in the past, and what I'm about to say is already in the future, which means the only point of control, the only point of reality, the only point of impact that you truly have that will change your past and your future at the same time is now, is this moment, is this moment
So
you
good.
listening to this podcast. Which means if you want to change your past, if you want to change your future, what is it that you need to do? You need to own the now. You need to own this moment, right? You need to get real in this moment and say, yes, this is where my life is going to change. If this moment, I own it every single moment of my life, if I'm aware of what's happening, if I'm aware of my thoughts, if I'm aware of my actions, if I'm aware when I fall, I will learn in the moment how to get back up. I will learn in this moment how my past is controlling my future. I will learn how to actively create my future by changing my current moment, by owning my current moment, by living my current moment, by being real present in the now, right? And
Yeah.
so your past may be trying to create your future right now. And that is true for most of us. And that's how most of us live on autopilot, because we're not present to the moment. So our past keeps creating our future. It owns our future. And here's the truth though, future is endless and the possibilities are endless because it's unknown, which means whatever crossroad you choose today, whatever you choose to take from your past into your future will define your future, right? You can choose to leave a baggage from the past and your future will be free of it. You can carry that baggage into the future and your future self will still be carrying it. You can choose to feel if you have had a bad relationship. And I like to give these examples because they're real in people's lives, right?
Yeah.
Somebody cheated on you in the past, right? You can choose to carry that baggage and say, all men are assholes or all women are assholes. They cheat on you, right? Whatever is your reality. And you can carry that and you will meet more assholes in your life because you're carrying that baggage. So everybody looks like that. You choose the same kind of partners. You tend to choose the same kind of relationships. You don't even know why you're falling for the trap again and again, but you're falling for that trap because you're carrying this baggage.
Yeah.
You have this reality from your past that you didn't even choose. You were a kid then, right? Somebody cheated on you. You were 17, 18, 19, 25, right? You're 40 now. You have evolved from that experience. You have 15 years more experience. There is no reason for you to believe that that past is still your present and will continue to be your future. You're a different person. And that's how we operate, right? We take those scars of the past and make meaning of it. Even if those scars happened when you were a child, you
Right.
still carry it and you go, oh, I'm going to carry this scar because the world is like this and this is going to be like this always. Well, maybe it is time. Maybe now is this time. Now, this conversation, as you're listening to Kien's podcast, maybe this is time for you to say, oh, okay, you know what? This is time for me to kind of finally say, I don't need this car no more. I'm going to choose something different. I'm going to choose a different path actively in this moment because this moment is when my future is getting created and I can choose to create it the way I want.
How beautiful. Which brings us into that next step that you mentioned earlier, which was organize your mind. Because once you can really be present without carrying the crap from the past, without, extending that into the future for worry, you can start to think, oh my God, what am I thinking right now? Okay, this is past thinking. There's all these different ways of thinking. And when you choose a thought, you will also basically choose the corresponding emotion because what you focus on will grow. So all these different ways of thinking, and then knowing, like you said, most of those thoughts, 80% of them are going to be negative, but you don't have to believe every thought that is there. The one thing we can choose is we hold the flashlight in terms of where we could focus and shine our attention, right? Is this what you mean by organize your mind?
Yeah. Organizing your mind is about being more conscious of the thought that you will choose, like you said.
Yeah.
It is more awareness towards that every single event that happens in our life, every circumstance that appears in our life creates multiplicity of thinking, right?
Yeah.
So here's how it happens. You have an event or circumstance that happens. You have maybe 10, 20 different thinking patterns that are independent of the event that are being created at that time. The
Mhm.
process is really fast. So what happens is you default to the thinking pattern that you always default to, because that's the neural network that has been re-emphasized multiple times,
Yeah.
right? So it's like the default. Let's go to that because that's always the safest path. We've proven it 10,000 times at this point. But what happens when this happens is anything that was in your past is what is getting reinstated again and again. And that's why you've traveled the same neural network 10,000 times. If you can choose to ask yourself a simple question, which is there a more empowered thought that I can choose, or a more empowered way of thinking I can choose? Or what is a more empowered way of thinking I can choose? It will give you that pause that you need to not fall back to your default.
Yeah.
Give you that pause where your emotional self and your rational self will have a conversation
Hmm.
and will go, hold on, maybe there's a different thinking pattern I can choose. Maybe there's a different thinking that could happen. Early on in this conversation, I was talking about how me putting myself into the shoes of the other people have changed the way I perceive reality of somebody else, and has increased my empathy towards the kindness and humanness of somebody else. That is an empowered thought, because suddenly I can suspend myself from the emotions or experience or intensity of their political views, let's say, for example, and go simply to what about the human experience? Why does this person believe what they believe? Can there be humanness to it? Right? Their
Mm.
beliefs about, and I don't know, and I don't care what you believe about vaccines or not vaccines, and politics and not politics. The reason why I'm giving this example is because the world can use some more empathy today, for sure. Like we all can use more kindness. We can all somehow come back to humanity. And I think this would be a powerful way to get back to it, is to say, hey, what if I chose to think a different, more empowered thought? What if I chose to say, that person's also having a human experience? Let me explore this more with them, instead of just freaking out about them and typing hastily on Facebook saying, no, you are an evil person. How can you say that millions are dying? Let's take a break. Let's try to understand what the other person is saying.
Mm.
Suddenly we have empathy. We understand their humanness. And once we understand their humanness, it's easier to have a dialogue instead of fighting and raging for no reason whatsoever. We're all human beings having human experience with our own sense of securities and insecurities. There are make believes behind us. We're not trying to be evil people. We're trying to
Mm.
make the best of our lives. All of us are. And so that is just an example of how even more extreme scenarios, which tend to be extrapolated right now in society, can be simplified by simply choosing a better, more empowered thinking pattern to say, hey, how is it that I can approach this situation differently? Like if you
Yeah.
hate your boss and you've always hated your boss, can there be a different way to approach it? Can there be a more empowered thought that would help you circumvent and navigate that situation and actually get you what you really want? Because it puts things in perspectives and changes the viewpoint of how you'll approach, and changes the actions that you will take because of the thinking that you have chosen.
Mm, beautiful. I know we're running short on time, so we'll just hit it real quick, and then I'll ask my final question. But the last two components of really being able to kind of guide yourself and coach yourself, and and transform yourself, is bioengineering and also connectedness. We talk about a lot of bioengineering on this podcast all the time. I mean, you need to just, when you physically move, when your body, when you give your body the right nutrients and all it is, you start to think differently as well. Do you have a few favorite bioengineering type of things that you like to share?
Yes, and so bioengineering is basically where we integrate biology and
Mhm.
and habits and our mental structures that allow or don't allow peak performance. And there are many models for really enhancing, and it adapts to the person. But there's some global that have been proven again and again
Yep.
to increase our outcomes. So things like meditation,
Yep.
supplementation, the way we eat,
Yeah.
which is probably one of the biggest impacts that somebody could have immediately in their life, like change in shift in energy just by simply switching to a little bit of fasting, a little bit better diet, and so on and so forth, and looking
Yes.
at what they're actually eating instead of just eating it. And then, of course, movement, which is paramount. Yeah, it's so important. So that's bioengineering, really, in really quick summary. Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, connectedness.
Yeah. Connected. When we talk about connectedness, we talk about how we are one universal mind or one humanity, and we are aligned through many things. But two key prominent things within the field of connectedness is purpose, is to have a purposeful life. and to be able to define it, to be able to find it, to be able to pursue it, to be able to live it in the moment, not really pursue purpose as a place to get to, but a place to live from. And
Mm,
second is intuition. It's develop the art of leaning into greater knowing. If I may simplify the word of intuition, because sometimes intuition sounds like some out of the world thinking. It's
mhm.
not. It's more attunement of you with your being and you in attunement with people around you. There's and everybody has felt it at some point in their life. We just turn it off because it feels too much and feels like we can't really regulate and understand it. But now scientifically we can understand it a little bit better. But if you walked into a party and immediately you felt this is my place or this is not my place,
Yeah,
that's intuition kicking in at the highest drive in the
right.
easiest form that you can see. When you are about to do a partnership with someone and something feels right or doesn't feel right, that's intuition kicking in into a high drive or low drive. Somebody's attractive to you even from across the hall, that's intuition telling you maybe you should walk over and talk to the person. That's intuition, the simplest of forms, but you could use intuition for pretty much anything. Knowing who to partner with, what work is right for you, if you should do a particular thing, not do a particular thing. We are very attuned individuals. Our kids are great to watch because they're so intuitive. It's insane because nobody has turned it off for them. But as
Mhm.
adults, you can build it again, and it will really, really be helpful to experience the joy of life a lot more.
Oh, beautiful. No, Ajit, we're out of time now, but my God, I mean, people who have listened to this podcast, the amount of gems that you guys have heard, the golden nuggets that you hear, you just know how much work, Ajit has put into himself, and he's sharing a lot of his knowledge too. Let people know. I know you are starting up a podcast, right? And what's the name of the podcast? How do people find it?
So recently we started a podcast called Master Coaching with Ajit. It is very specific to learning coaching techniques, but you could use these coaching techniques for yourself. So even if you're not a coach, it's a very useful podcast. What we do, we break down every other week, we break down specific areas of your life and philosophically, psychologically, spiritually, and biologically sometimes explain why that thing doesn't work or why that thing works and how
Mm,
you can train yourself to be more capable in that area. For example, last week at the point of this recording, we released episode 45. And in that episode, we talked about confidence and
mm.
how to really break down and understand confidence, not as a feeling, but as a skill, and develop that as a skill. So we talk for like good 30, 40 minutes where we give you a full breakdown of how to do that. And topics like that. We talk in future episodes, we are talking about anxiety, we are talking about performance, we're talking about many diverse areas that are real for people in day-to-day life. So it's really meaningful, even if you're not a coach yet.
Oh, super awesome. We're going to leave a link down in the podcast description here. Ajit, thank you for your time. The last question to you is, of the life that you've lived thus far, what has been your best medicine?
Life I've lived that thus far, what has been my best medicine? I think love. Love is
Yeah.
always the best medicine. Love, and when I say love, it's not only romantic love, it's love for humanity, love for people around me, as friends, as parents, as colleagues, as just people that meet each other, love for life. I think love is a medicine, is a fuel that is always available in one form or another and is really healing for anything in life, really.
Love is medicine. Ajit, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
Thank you so much, Kien.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if this podcast is bringing a lot of value to you, if you find that your life is just improving with this podcast, that your life is getting to the next level, please consider supporting it. And here's a few ways you can do so. You can do so by liking this video and commenting on this video, and also sharing this video with your friends and family. Another thing you can do is go to ratethispodcast.com/ThriveState. Go ahead and leave us a 5-star review there. It will really, really help this show grow. And this will give me more time so that I could actually give more content to you, just like you got in this episode. And if you haven't already picked up a copy of my book, Thrive State, Your Blueprint for Optimal Health, Longevity, and Peak Performance, you can pick it up now. It became a #1 new release in longevity. Go to thrivestatebook.com. And if you enjoy the book, please consider leaving us a review as well. And the last thing you can do if you're liking everything here and you want to work more closely with me as well as my team to get you into the Thrive State, go to kienvu.com/accelerator and consider joining the home course, the Thrive State Accelerator. It's really the course that I use. It's the concepts that I use personally when I work with CEOs, celebrities, and my high-profile clients to get them to the Thrive State. Again, the Thrive State Accelerator at kienvu.com/accelerator. And because you're a listener of this podcast, I want you to save 25% by using the coupon code podcast25. I hope we continue to give value to you. And remember always, you are your best medicine.